Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this guy start to finish in no time at all using washes and contrast. So we've got something different this time. Probably the most noticeable thing straight off the bat is it's bright green instead of other colours, which I think is really striking, turned out really well. And he has a head which is a skull, it's a bird skull from the Citadel skull set. You get 6 of those in each skull set. This model didn't entirely go to plan, so I'll cover that in the outro. But if you notice his arms change colour halfway through, you know why. Just paint them like the robes and the rest of the model. I had a bit of a mistake with paint that just didn't behave how I expected it to. And these type of things happen in painting, so I'll cover that at the end. But the overall effect of the model is super good. We've used a basing scheme, which is very much like our spooky basing tutorial, and I dropped a couple of skulls on there, some tufts, you know, the normal stuff, and that really finishes off the model because he is super bright. And he's got actually some pretty high level metal. It's just been done with my favorite TM kind of like rust mix, verdigris mix, and then we've put on some clear red, which really does jump out and also distracts from his slightly shiny arms after my mistake. So if you like the video, please give it a like, please comment, please subscribe, let us know what you'd like to see coming next. Let's jump in. Okay, so here is our recipient. He has been primed black from a can, always Chaos Black in this case, and then I've airbrushed from above with white, but you could absolutely use any spray from above with the white. The important thing if you're going to do this with a spray can is don't start and stop your spray above the model. If you start here, go over the model in the wave, then stop, then the splutter at the beginning and end of it you'll miss. So I tend to spray in a couple of short passes. Now what I've done with this guy is he's been hit all over from about 45 degrees, and then he's been hit additionally from the top to make sure that the top remains the whitest. Very important finishing step, the entire model has then been hit with a layer of GW's spray varnish, the Monitorum varnish, and that has ensured a kind of consistent overall finish, which is going to affect how our washes work on it. Right, so for our first stage we're just using a white. Now, if you've primed this from a can, I'd recommend using off-white. You've got Corax white available, and that's perfect because it's actually kind of just super light grey. But if you've got a preferred white, I really like Vallejo, which is what I'm using then. Just work with that. I'm working the excess off my brush here. Use the dampening pad, things aren't too dry. And basically, this is going to be used to exaggerate the work that we've got already on our model. It won't be as noticeable on the top sections, but down below where things are darker and the spray's not hit as much, we're just looking to add a kind of an extra level of potential detail for our wash, our contrasty wash, to be able to benefit from. Here we can see what we've added with that dry brushing stage. Now, I guess for a lot of you this may seem like a strange concept. We've already hit it from above with the spray. Why would we do more? What we've gained is a level of depth for these folds, for example, where we've got both volume based, so it's been hit from above, and then texture based. If it sticks out, it's been hit pre-shading. Areas which would have just been dark previously they're darker than the rest of the model. It's darker under here because it's not been hit by the first step, but these folds, they've been picked out and hit. These edges, they've been picked out and hit, and areas that are just difficult to get to, like the stuff around the bottom, we've still hit with texture-based techniques. So it's a really lovely middle ground for kind of catching everything, and this is a brilliant foundation for our following steps. Cracked out the big boy. This is a size 4. This is the one that I reserve for washes. All right, so we're going to be making this up on the fly. We'll see how I work things out here. So we've got 1 part of Lamy medium. You could use glaze medium from Vallejo in there if you wanted. It's 2 parts of that. Then I'm going to use Tesseract Glow. This has been shaken a lot. Please make sure you shake this way more than you think would be necessary. 1 part, 2 parts. So we're about 50-50 currently. It's got bubbles in because I've shaken it so much. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I might have to get rid of those with a little drop of thinner. And then we've got 1/2 part of Warp Lightning. Now, Warp Lightning is an extremely strong paint, so that may well overpower this, in which case I'm going to have to go back with some more Tesseract Glow. It's a big one, so that probably adds up to 2 parts there. So we're 5 parts to half
Tesseract Glow to Warp Lightning currently, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put in 1 drop of just normal airbrush thinner here because I do not like those bubbles, and that's going to pop them top tip there. I use thinner for a lot of my washes for that reason. It makes them pull into recesses more, so it's a useful tip to have around even if you're not an airbrusher. Now this mix, let's see how it goes. We're using it neat but not too saturated, and this is going to be going all over our model. Okay, so with the first stage fully dry, what we're going to be doing is adding a little bit of Flash Gits yellow. You could use any light yellow though, Ureal is fine. To our white, I'm making a super bright lemony dry brush. You could use ice yellow for this also if you wanted from Vallejo. Make sure it stays nice and soft and subtle. And then nothing techie here, we're just going to be dry brushing in exactly the same manner as we dry brushed before. So you could actually end things there. That's really looking really interesting. You like the kind of overall effect of it. Now it is time for us to do our second stage of our wash. So we've not changed it between the first and second stage, but what I am going to be doing is using it slightly thinner here, so there'll be less on the brush, and I'm going to try and work top to bottom to prevent pooling. Okay, so that second stage has dried really nicely. Got a really lovely effect on that now. I'm just going to soften it up with another dry brush. As with the last wash, this is kind of optional here. It's up to you whether you want to do this stage or not. And it is also up to you entirely exactly how yellow or not yellow you want this to be. So you could be pretty much white with a hint of it. You could be entirely white. You could just add white to the brush that did have the yellow in. So it's going to kind of carry it over you from previous steps, but not be a fully white one. It's just down to personal preference, and you can apply it however you wish. So I'm going to go with a little bit of yellow in there, not a massive amount, and then I will quickly whisk around it, and then I'll do one more step, adding a little bit more white on top of it. And I'm using my dampening pad pretty heavily here because I really want this to be a subtle, like buffing, glowing effect. It's going down quite nicely, it's hitting the edges really well, and that's something that I'm looking to work with the model on rather than against it. Now that stage is dried, I'm going to use a very light dry brush just to pick out the raised areas again. Quick all-round weathering steps. All of the steel areas are going to be hit with a watered down wash of Doom Ball, just Doom Ball and water. Just looking to really rust those chains up. You can specifically have it in only some areas, but I'm going to be hitting the entire areas with it all over the model. And the bronze sections, we're going to be doing a quick wash in exactly the same way, kind of exactly the same proportions, just with water and paint just on the handle and any other areas that you've decided to paint bronze on the model. Okay, so it's time to wash our metallic washes. So I'm going to be mixing the aquamarine blue from the previous step with some greenish white from AK, and I'm just going to be jumping straight to Stroll Slayer orange for the rusty sections. Now this wash I'm looking to be a bit more specific with, so I won't hit every single area, I don't think, but I will try and keep kind of in the recesses, and you don't want to be hitting anywhere with this that you didn't hit with the previous brown step. That should be pretty easy though, because we used an all-over wash, which is one of the reasons to do an all-over wash as your first stage. It is impossible to miss stuff. So in a couple of places I'm going to be using directional washing, so like pulling it against this lip, against that lip, pulling it in the eye, and aside from that really you're just kind of dotting your details around in any area where you think it would be particularly rusty. I'll take exactly the same approach with the 50-50 mix of aquamarine blue and greenish white on the golden sections. So I'm now moving on to Fire Dragon Bright, exactly the same as the previous step, but again we're just keeping things really specific here. So we're only allowed to place this within areas where our previous step was, our orange and I'm trying to be pretty delicate with this. The most important thing is to make sure that it's the right dilution and there's not too much of it on the brush. You don't have to be so delicate because you're using a small brush, so you can get where you need to, but just make sure that not too much of it is leaving the brush when you get there, because if you do have too much on it, then it doesn't matter how light your touch is or how delicate you are, you'll just end up doing something that you regret. So I prefer to do my control on the palette, and then it doesn't matter if I'm clumsy with my hands. So for the verdigris, I'm literally going to take a pinprick of the Arion blue and mix it into our greenish white. I just want to make sure it's not pure greenish white. And then, just like we have with the orange, this is going to get concentrated on the recesses. Do make sure that it is fairly dilute. That's what is going to allow it to be kind of forgiving, and also it'll help with the natural effect of it being a kind of the type of thing that happens in wet recesses over time due to age. Okay, so basing wise, we've just got some Agrellan Badland that's been put down really thick on top of a piece of cork. If you want to learn more about getting the most out of the GW texture paints, do check out the link in the description. We just wanted something kind of hyper textured, which is perfect for dry brushing and washing. Pretty much just following our spooky base tutorial steps here. So if you want to see a more in-depth version of that, then by all means do check out the link in the description. Just getting a bad and black, and while this is wet, I'm working it into a couple of areas to darken them up. Again, before things have dried, we'll grab our rust grey, and I'm going to choose a couple of areas to be lighter. The only important thing with this is that anything you do that goes towards the edge, do make sure it gets towards the very edge. That's super important for the kind of final effect where we get that crisp black base rim. So I'm not sure if it was too clear in the last one, but do make sure that you do use water with those. My brush was fairly saturated with water when I was going to and from the palette, and it is an important part of kind of making sure that you don't obscure the detail. Because when you've used a hyper textured paint, if you put down too thick paint on top of it, you will lose some of the detail that you've chose to add to your model. All right, so dry brushing. I'm just going to be starting with our highlight color, which was the rust grey, and the base will be hit all over. In some sections this won't stand out too much, and in some it'll stand out a lot more where you've gone darker, but just work your way around and make sure that you hit every single area with a solid foundation of this. Jump into our Fenrisian grey. This should start being a fair bit more noticeable. And final stage time, move to our blue horror. This is quite a bit lighter than any of the previous stages, so making sure I work a lot of it off the brush, and I will use a softer touch. At the point at which there's a lot less of it on the brush because I've worked it off, then I'm quite happy to go in there with a little bit more kind of heavy-handed approach. I think actually I am going to grab a little bit of white. So I've got Corax white here, just a tiny amount of it. Corax white is actually quite a grey white, so this is one way to add a final stage without it being particularly crazy bright. So the reason it's so important to go right to the very edge with all of our effects is we want to be cutting off organic process with this. So we want a hard line where we just happen to end what we were doing. By kind of cutting it off with a black, you want things to go right to the edge and then be cut off, not to end a little bit before the edge and then for black to appear. So I'm actually going to pin this model. I'm going to do that by making a pilot and just using a Citadel pin vise. It's not a heavy model, it doesn't need to have a big pin or anything like that, but it's just going to help us attach it more securely into the base. So my method is I'll make a tiny pin that fits in this, I'll press that into the ground. Now importantly here, when I built my base, as it was drying, I pressed my model into it. Hopefully that shows up there. So I've already got a really obvious kind of indication of where this guy is going to go, and that will help out him kind of blend with his environment. Okay, so just got a paper clip here. So for making my pilot one, I just cut it off super short. And then place my model where I want it to be on the base and kind of carefully press it in. There we go, you can see I've got my pilot hole there. And that just ensures that this pin is in exactly the right place when I cut one that is the proper length. So I've just got some thick super glue here. I'm gonna put a little on the base, you don't need too much though. And then hopefully this should all work perfectly as our pilot hole is in exactly the right place. He says placing the miniature on completely backwards. There we go. So now there is a little bit of give in this texture. So if I keep it held down while it sets, I will get a really, really good bond there, and he will be more firmly seated in his environment. There we go, perfect. So he blends really nicely with that stone, even though they've been done with completely different colors. The stone was washed with a mix of Huldra blue and black, and actually it kind of blends in really nicely with our environment on the base, which is pretty convenient. Time for some skulls. Now I'm using a couple of products here. This is thinner, just airbrush thinner. I'm using a couple of products here which perhaps quite a few of you will not be familiar with. So here I have Smoke from Tamiya, and here I have Clear Red. And when mixed together, they make a rather disgusting, realistic, glossy looking blood mixture. I'm going to work fast. I would be blowing this just with my mouth if I wasn't trying to do it on camera, but getting my face in and the amount of control needed for that is pretty impossible, so we're going to be doing it like this. Now these are pretty brutal products, so don't get too close to them in terms of inhalation or anything, but also make sure that your brushes are kept in good condition. Now I've loaded this brush up with a lot of thinner. I'm going to take some more of the Clear Red, remove the excess, get in there with my airbrush. And already we can see that it's starting to dry on the brush. They do dry extremely quick as lacquers. If you do have lacquer thinner, of course, that will make your life quite a bit easier, but in terms of these small amounts, thinner is okay. So I'm going to do one more load. I'm going to move super quick on this one. There we go. So here we have the final effect. He's looking a bit more disgusting than he was, and a bit more freaky, and that's perfect. I'm just going to go around and neaten up these a little bit, do a couple of dabs of the brush, and he is done.
All right, so finished model again. Looking pretty snazzy. Really pleased with that, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about mistakes whilst painting. So this happens a lot, like when I make tutorials for the channel, I'm on a pretty aggressive time budget and I don't have time to kind of start again very often, but sometimes my stuff literally just gets binned if I'm trying something out that is new or whatever, and a lot of the time parts of my models go wrong, and you just have to be ready for that to happen. Now, I had no reason to know that Athematic Blue came out really glossy. It doesn't say gloss on it. All the contrast paints are meant to behave somewhat similarly. They definitely don't, but they're meant to have the same properties unless they literally say like gloss on them at the end or something like that. And in some situations it can be really helpful, and in some it can be awful. Like me, like it just doesn't wash as nicely as it could, and the kind of the chains and the arms, they just turned it out looking absolutely awful. So that was why I decided to put Clear Red on the model. So I repainted them a little, like kind of glazed over the arms with the colours that I'd used on the rest of the body on the robes, and then I went in with Clear Red, and the idea with that is I was going to put something super shiny and striking on the weapon to pull some more attention to the weapon because it already looked really good, and then also get some dots on the arm, and comparatively that is going to mean that the slightly shiny stuff underneath it looks less shiny because there's super glossy, properly, I wanted it to be glossy stuff on top of it. You just have to be prepared for this type of thing in painting. Sometimes it happens, and especially if you're trying to do stuff fast, it's often a way that you work your way towards finding a better way to do stuff anyway. So I actually think that the model looks better with the clear red on it, the bloody effect, so it turned out for the better. But that's it, just be ready to roll with the punches. These things happen, and don't be downhearted when they do. You're doing something creative. Things are not going to go according to plan all the time. So thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think of the kind of like super Ghostbusters theme, scary ghosts. Give us some suggestions, give us some comments, let us know what you'd like to see next. Hit that bell notification to be notified for future content. I'll catch you in the next video.